Everyone knows the story of Catherine the Great, a German princess who married into Russian royalty, overthrew her husband, and became one of history's most powerful empresses. The enlightened ruler who expanded Russia's borders, founded cities, and brought European culture to the barbaric East. But what if I told you that everything you think you know about Catherine II is carefully constructed propaganda designed to hide one of history's most shocking political systems? The real Catherine wasn't just a foreign usurper who slept her way to power. She was the architect of a sexual political machine so sophisticated, so ruthless, and so effective that it would make Machiavelli weep with envy. For 34 years, this German woman didn't just rule Russia. She turned the entire empire into her personal pleasure palace, while simultaneously transforming it into a European superpower. You've heard whispers about her legendary appetite for young men. You might know about Grigory Potemkin, her most famous lover and political partner. But you don't know about the systematic recruitment of sexual partners from across the empire, the secret payments to families who provided their sons for imperial service, or the elaborate court rituals that surrounded Catherine's bedroom politics. Behind the facade of Enlightenment philosophy and cultural refinement lay a machinery of sexual exploitation that would make a modern sex trafficking operation look amateur. Catherine didn't just take lovers, she industrialized desire, turning physical intimacy into the primary currency of political advancement in the Russian Empire. But here's the most disturbing part. It worked. While other European monarchs struggled with rebellions, financial crises, and military defeats, Catherine's system of erotic statecraft delivered unprecedented success. Russia doubled in size, the economy boomed, and the empire's international prestige reached heights not seen since the days of Peter the Great. The question isn't whether Catherine was sexually voracious, she absolutely was. The question is whether she was a depraved nymphomaniac who accidentally stumbled into greatness, or a calculating genius who weaponized sexuality to achieve political dominance. And the answer will shock you far more than any bedroom scandal. If you think you're ready to learn how one German woman turned an entire empire into her personal sex cult while simultaneously making it a global superpower, then subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments what you think you know about powerful women in history. Because once you understand Catherine's true methods, you'll never look at political power the same way again. Let's begin with the official story that Russian and European historians have carefully crafted over the past 2 centuries. Sophie Auguste Friederike von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornburg was born in 1729 to minor German nobility. At 14, she was selected as a bride for the future Peter III of Russia, converted to Orthodox Christianity, took the name Catherine, and married the heir to the Russian throne in 1745. According to this sanitized version, Catherine's early years in Russia were marked by intellectual curiosity and political frustration. Her husband Peter was weak, possibly mentally unstable, and obsessed with Prussian military culture rather than Russian interests. Catherine, by contrast, threw herself into learning Russian language and culture, corresponding with Enlightenment philosophers like Voltaire and Diderot, and preparing herself for eventual rule. The marriage was reportedly unconsummated for years due to Peter's sexual dysfunction and Catherine's initial innocence. When Catherine finally began taking lovers, it was presented as a natural response to her husband's neglect and her own awakening political consciousness. Her affair with Sergei Saltykov was portrayed as a romantic awakening, while her relationship with Grigory Orlov was described as a passionate love match that happened to serve political purposes. Catherine's rise to power in 1762 is usually presented as an almost inevitable response to her husband's incompetence. Peter III had alienated the military by ending the successful 7 Years' War just as Russia was winning, offended the Orthodox Church by attempting to secularize church lands, and horrified the nobility by openly favoring German advisors over Russian aristocrats. When Catherine launched her coup, she was supposedly responding to popular demand rather than personal ambition. Her 34-year reign is typically characterized as the golden age of Russian culture and expansion. Catherine is credited with founding cities like Odessa and Kherson, annexing Crimea and parts of modern-day Ukraine, establishing the Hermitage art collection, and corresponding with the greatest minds of the European Enlightenment. Her legal reforms, codified in the famous nakaz or instruction, are presented as an attempt to create a more rational and humane system of government. Even Catherine's personal relationships are usually sanitized in this official narrative. Yes, she had numerous lovers throughout her reign, but these relationships are presented as either romantic attachments or political necessities. Grigory Potemkin is portrayed as her great love and trusted partner in governance. Other favorites like Alexander Lanskoy and Platon Zubov are described as younger men who provided companionship to an aging empress while serving useful administrative functions. The scandals that surrounded Catherine during her lifetime are typically dismissed as enemy propaganda or the inevitable gossip that surrounds any powerful woman. Stories about her sexual appetite were supposedly spread by hostile foreign courts seeking to undermine Russian prestige. Tales of orgies, sexual torture, and the systematic exploitation of young men are treated as salacious fiction rather than historical reality. This narrative emphasizes Catherine's genuine intellectual achievements and her role in modernizing Russia. Her correspondence with Voltaire demonstrates her commitment to Enlightenment principles. Her art collection shows her sophisticated cultural tastes. Her military victories prove her strategic acumen. Her administrative reforms reveal her dedication to rational governance. Most importantly, this version of Catherine's story suggests that her personal relationships, however numerous, never interfered with her political effectiveness. If anything, her ability to inspire devotion in her lovers is presented as evidence of her charismatic leadership. The implication is that Catherine successfully balanced her private desires with her public duties, achieving both personal fulfillment and political success. This comfortable narrative allows us to admire Catherine as a complex but ultimately admirable historical figure. She represents the possibility that absolute power need not corrupt absolutely, that personal freedom and political effectiveness can coexist, and that even monarchical systems can produce enlightened results under the right leadership. But what if this entire story is a carefully constructed lie designed to hide the most sophisticated system of sexual exploitation in European history? The first crack in the official narrative appears when you examine the actual mechanics of Catherine's court. This wasn't simply a matter of a powerful woman taking lovers. It was an institutionalized system for recruiting, training, and deploying young men as instruments of imperial policy. Catherine's lovers weren't chosen randomly or based purely on physical attraction. They were carefully selected through a network of talent scouts that extended throughout the Russian Empire and beyond. Noble families would literally audition their sons for imperial favor, understanding that sexual service to the empress could elevate their entire bloodline to unprecedented wealth and power. The process began with regional governors and military commanders who were instructed to identify physically attractive young men from good families. These candidates would be brought to St. Petersburg under various pretexts: military service, administrative training, or cultural education. Once in the capital, they would be evaluated not just for their looks, but for their discretion, intelligence, and psychological malleability. Those who passed the initial screening would be assigned to positions within the imperial household where they could be observed more closely. Catherine's inner circle would assess their sexual skills, political reliability, and potential usefulness in various administrative capacities. The most promising candidates would eventually be introduced to the Empress herself through carefully orchestrated social events. But here's where the system becomes truly disturbing. Catherine didn't just take these men as lovers. She psychologically conditioned them to serve her political interests through a combination of sexual reward, financial dependency, and emotional manipulation that would impress modern cult leaders. The Empress maintained detailed files on each lover's family background, personal weaknesses, and potential usefulness. She would shower them with gifts, titles, and estates, but always in ways that reinforced their complete dependence on her favor. Many received thousands of serfs and vast territories, but the grants were structured so that they could be revoked instantly if the recipient fell from grace. The sexual dimension of these relationships was equally calculated. Catherine employed court physicians to monitor her lover's health and sexual performance. She maintained a staff of female servants whose job was to prepare young men for imperial encounters, teaching them specific techniques and preferences that the Empress enjoyed. The entire imperial household was organized around facilitating and concealing these relationships. Even more disturbing was Catherine's practice of sharing her lovers with trusted female allies. Countess Bruce, one of Catherine's closest confidants, would often test potential favorites before they were introduced to the Empress. This wasn't just about ensuring sexual compatibility. It was about creating a network of complicity that bound the entire court together through shared secrets and mutual vulnerability. The financial cost of maintaining this system was staggering. Catherine spent millions of rubles on gifts to her lovers, far exceeding the budgets allocated for military campaigns or public works projects. The Empress would regularly grant entire provinces to men she had known intimately for only a few months, transfers of wealth that dwarfed the expenditures of other European monarchs on their entire courts. But the most shocking aspect of Catherine's system was how she disposed of lovers who had outlived their usefulness. The Empress rarely resorted to execution or exile. Instead, she developed more sophisticated methods of neutralizing potential threats while maintaining her reputation for magnanimity. Former lovers would be assigned to distant governorships or military commands where they could be monitored but not interfere with court politics. They would be married off to carefully selected wives who were secretly in Catherine's service. Their children would be taken into imperial households where they could be raised as hostages to ensure their father's continued loyalty. The psychological toll on these men was enormous. Many suffered from what we would now recognize as severe depression and anxiety disorders. Several committed suicide rather than face the prospect of permanent exile from the Empress's presence. Others developed addictive behaviors or sexual dysfunction that persisted long after their relationships with Catherine had ended. This brings us to the most disturbing revelation about Catherine's system. It wasn't just about personal gratification or even political control. It was about rewriting the fundamental nature of political power in the Russian Empire, turning sexual submission into the primary qualification for advancement in government service. Now let me tell you the story of Alexei Bobrinsky, a man whose life perfectly illustrates how Catherine's system of sexual politics shaped individual destinies and imperial policy. His story reveals the human cost of the Empress's erotic statecraft and shows how even her own family members became pawns in her larger game. Bobrinsky was born in 1762, the illegitimate son of Catherine and Grigory Orlov, one of her most powerful lovers, and the man who had helped orchestrate her rise to power. But unlike other royal bastards who were quietly acknowledged and provided for, Bobrinsky's existence became a carefully managed state secret that would influence Russian politics for decades. Catherine couldn't publicly acknowledge Bobrinsky without admitting that she had been sexually active before her husband Peter III's death, which would have undermined the legitimacy of her coup. Instead, she created an elaborate fiction that the child belonged to a minor court official and arranged for him to be raised in secrecy by trusted servants. For the first years of his life, Bobrinsky had no idea of his true parentage. He was told that his father was a war hero who had died serving the empire, and that his mother was a gentlewoman who had perished in childbirth. Catherine arranged for him to receive an excellent education, but always through intermediaries who had no knowledge of his real identity. The psychological impact of this deception was devastating. Bobrinsky grew up knowing that he was somehow different from other children, but unable to understand why. He received privileges that seemed inexplicable given his supposed humble origins, but was never allowed to form close relationships with his peers. The empress would sometimes observe him from a distance during court ceremonies, but he was taught to think of her as a distant godlike figure rather than as his mother. As he matured into adolescence, Bobrinsky began to display the same physical characteristics that had attracted Catherine to his father. He was tall, handsome, and possessed of the kind of aristocratic bearing that marked him as potentially dangerous in a court where legitimacy was always contested. Catherine realized that her son could become either a valuable asset or a mortal threat, depending on how carefully she managed his development. At 18, Bobrinsky was finally told the truth about his parentage, but not by his mother. Instead, Catherine arranged for him to discover his identity through a carefully staged revelation involving forged documents and coached witnesses. The empress wanted her son to believe that he had uncovered the secret through his own intelligence rather than having it revealed through maternal sentiment. The revelation transformed Bobrinsky from a confused young man into a political time bomb. He now understood why he had been given special treatment throughout his childhood, but he also realized that his very existence was an ongoing threat to his mother's reputation and political position. He was simultaneously the most privileged and most endangered person in the Russian Empire. Catherine's solution to this dilemma reveals the ruthless calculation that underlied all her personal relationships. She decided to neutralize Bobrinsky's potential threat by making him complicit in her system of sexual politics, effectively forcing her own son to become a participant in the machinery that had created him. Bobrinsky was assigned to a military regiment where his fellow officers had been carefully selected from among Catherine's former lovers and their relatives. He was surrounded by men who owed their positions to sexual service and who understood that their continued prosperity depended on maintaining the empress's secrets. In effect, Catherine created a protective circle around her son that was also a prison of compromised loyalty. The young man was then provided with his own series of sexual partners, carefully chosen women whose relationships with him were monitored and managed by the Imperial Secret Service. Catherine wanted to ensure that her son experienced the same combination of physical pleasure and political dependency that she had used to control so many others. But Bobrinsky proved more psychologically resilient than his mother had anticipated. Instead of becoming a willing participant in the court's sexual politics, he began to rebel against the system that had shaped his life. He started drinking heavily, gambling compulsively, and engaging in increasingly reckless behavior that threatened to expose not just his own secrets, but those of the entire court. The final confrontation between mother and son took place in 1796, just months before Catherine's death. Babrinsky had threatened to publish a memoir revealing his true parentage and describing the sexual exploitation he had witnessed at court. Catherine's response reveals both her political genius and her complete moral bankruptcy. Rather than having her son killed or exiled, the empress arranged for him to be voluntarily committed to a private asylum where he would be treated for what court physicians described as hereditary madness. Babrinsky would live comfortably for the rest of his life, but he would never again be in a position to threaten the imperial system that had created and ultimately destroyed him. The tragedy of Alexei Babrinsky illustrates how Catherine's sexual politics corrupted even the most intimate family relationships. The empress, who claimed to embody Enlightenment values of reason and progress, had created a system so morally corrupted that she couldn't even acknowledge her own child without undermining her political position. This brings us to the darkest period of Catherine's reign, when the empress's sexual appetites and political paranoia combined to create a reign of terror that would have impressed even the most vicious Roman emperors. By the 1780s, Catherine's system had become so elaborate and so dangerous that it began to devour itself. The crisis began with the Pugachev Rebellion of 1773 to 1775, when a Cossack leader claiming to be the deceased Peter III raised a massive peasant army against Catherine's rule. The rebellion revealed how deeply Catherine's sexual scandals had undermined her political legitimacy, as Pugachev's propaganda explicitly played on rumors about the empress's debauchery and the suspicious circumstances surrounding her husband's death. Catherine's response to the rebellion wasn't just military. It was a systematic campaign to eliminate anyone who might have knowledge of her sexual activities that could be used against her. The empress began what can only be described as a purge of former lovers, their families, and anyone who had facilitated her romantic relationships over the previous decade. The killing began with seemingly natural deaths and accidents. Former lovers would die in hunting mishaps, fall from their horses, or succumb to sudden illnesses. Their servants would disappear, their correspondence would be confiscated, and their families would be scattered to distant parts of the empire. To outside observers, these appeared to be isolated tragedies rather than a coordinated elimination campaign. But the most chilling aspect of Catherine's purge was how she used her current lovers to eliminate her former ones. The empress would share intimate details about past relationships with her present favorites, effectively turning them into assassins who were motivated by both jealousy and the desire to protect their own positions. Grigory Potemkin, Catherine's most powerful lover and the man often described as her husband in all but name, became the chief orchestrator of these elimination campaigns. Potemkin had access to the imperial secret police, control over military units throughout the empire, and detailed knowledge of every person who had ever posed a threat to Catherine's reputation. Under Potemkin's direction, the purge expanded beyond former lovers to include anyone who had witnessed Catherine's sexual activities or who possessed compromising information about her private life. Court servants, military officers, foreign diplomats, and even Orthodox priests found themselves targeted for elimination if they had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The methods used were increasingly sophisticated and increasingly cruel. Victims would be arrested on fabricated charges, subjected to extended torture to ensure they hadn't shared their secrets with others, and then killed in ways designed to look like accidents or natural causes. Their bodies would be disposed of so thoroughly that many simply vanished without a trace. But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of Catherine's terror campaign was how it extended to the families of her victims. The empress understood that children and spouses might possess dangerous knowledge or might seek revenge for their loved ones' deaths. Entire bloodlines were eliminated to prevent future threats to imperial security. The scale of the killing is impossible to determine precisely because Catherine's agents destroyed most of the relevant records. Conservative estimates suggest that several hundred people died during the purge, but some historians believe the actual number was far higher. What is certain is that by 1780, virtually everyone who had intimate knowledge of Catherine's sexual activities during her first 2 decades of rule was either dead or had fled the empire. The purge's most distinguished victim was Gregory Orlov, Catherine's former lover and the father of her illegitimate son, Alexei Babrinsky. Orlov had become increasingly unstable in his later years, drinking heavily and making indiscreet comments about his past relationship with the empress. In 1783, he died suddenly at his estate, officially from a stroke but actually from poison administered by agents working for Potemkin. Catherine's reaction to Orlov's death reveals the complete corruption of her moral sense. She attended his funeral, delivered a touching eulogy about his service to the empire, and publicly grieved for the man she had ordered murdered. The empress had become so skilled at compartmentalizing her emotions that she could simultaneously mourn and celebrate the same death. The international implications of Catherine's domestic terror campaign were equally significant. European courts began to realize that the Russian empress they had been dealing with as a rational Enlightenment monarch was actually a psychopathic killer who would eliminate anyone who threatened her secrets. Several countries quietly recalled their ambassadors and reduced their diplomatic engagement with Russia. But the most lasting damage was psychological. Catherine had demonstrated that no one who served her sexually could ever truly be safe, even decades after their relationship had ended. This knowledge transformed the entire dynamic of her court, as everyone understood that intimacy with the empress was potentially a death sentence delayed by years or even decades. The terror campaign reached its climax with the elimination of Catherine's own personal physician, John Rogerson, who had attended her during childbirth and possessed detailed knowledge of her sexual health. Rogerson was found dead in his study in 1784, apparently having committed suicide by drinking poison. But witnesses reported that his hands had been bound and that the room showed signs of a struggle. With Rogerson's death, Catherine had essentially eliminated everyone who could provide concrete evidence of her sexual activities during the first half of her reign. She had purchased her security through mass murder, creating a protective circle of death around her most intimate secrets. The empress's final years were marked by an acceleration rather than a diminution of her sexual activities. Having eliminated the witnesses to her past indiscretions, Catherine felt free to indulge her appetites with even less restraint. She took a series of increasingly young lovers, including men who were barely out of adolescence when they entered her bed. The most notorious of these late relationships was with Platon Zubov, who became Catherine's lover when he was 22 and she was 60. But Zubov wasn't just another pretty face. He was a political operative trained from childhood to serve the empress's sexual and strategic needs. His family had been preparing him for imperial service since he was a teenager, essentially prostituting their son in exchange for political advancement. Catherine's relationship with Zubov reveals the final evolution of her sexual political system. By the 1790s, she was no longer simply taking lovers. She was receiving tributes of young men from families throughout the empire who understood that their sons' bodies were the price of political relevance. The empress had transformed the Russian nobility into a vast network of sexual exploitation that reached into every corner of the empire. But this system contained the seeds of its own destruction. As Catherine aged and her sexual demands became more desperate, she began to lose the political calculation that had previously guided her romantic choices. Her obsession with maintaining her sexual vitality led her to increasingly dangerous behaviors that ultimately caused her death. On November 6, 1796, Catherine collapsed in her private chambers after what court physicians delicately described as excessive physical exertion with her current favorite. She lingered for several hours, conscious but unable to speak, before dying that evening. The official cause of death was listed as a stroke, but the true cause was probably a heart attack brought on by sexual overexertion at the age of 67. Even Catherine's death was managed to protect her sexual secrets. Her body was immediately taken by trusted servants who dressed it in ceremonial robes that concealed any evidence of her final activities. The room where she died was thoroughly cleaned, and all potentially compromising materials were removed before other court officials were allowed to enter. Catherine the Great died as she had lived for the previous 3 decades, surrounded by a conspiracy of silence designed to hide the true nature of her rule. But the system she had created would outlive her by centuries, establishing patterns of sexual exploitation and political corruption that would plague Russia well into the modern era. The immediate aftermath of Catherine's death revealed the full extent of her system's impact on Russian society. Her son Paul I, who had spent his entire life in the shadow of his mother's sexual scandals, immediately began a campaign of revenge against everyone associated with her court. Within months of becoming emperor, Paul had arrested, exiled, or executed dozens of Catherine's former lovers and their associates. But Paul's purge couldn't undo the damage that his mother's system had inflicted on Russian political culture. For 34 years, advancement in the imperial service had depended more on sexual availability than on merit or competence. An entire generation of Russian administrators had learned that their success depended on their willingness to participate in or facilitate sexual exploitation. The international reputation of the Russian Empire had been permanently damaged by Catherine's scandals. For decades afterward, European courts would view Russian diplomats with suspicion, wondering whether they were genuine representatives of their country's interests or merely sexual agents serving the empress's personal agenda. Perhaps most significantly, Catherine's reign established a template for the relationship between sexual power and political authority that would influence Russian rulers for centuries. The connection between personal debauchery and imperial effectiveness that Catherine had demonstrated would be echoed in the behaviors of later rulers, from Alexander I's affairs to Nicholas II's relationship with Rasputin. Modern Russia continues to grapple with Catherine's complex legacy. On one hand, she genuinely transformed the country into a major European power, expanding its territory, developing its cultural institutions, and elevating its international prestige. On the other hand, she established patterns of corruption, sexual exploitation, and authoritarian control that continue to plague Russian society today. The archives containing the full details of Catherine's sexual activities remain classified by the Russian government more than 2 centuries after her death. Recent efforts by historians to access these materials have been consistently denied, suggesting that the complete truth about her reign is still considered too dangerous for public consumption. What we do know comes from fragmentary sources, encrypted diplomatic correspondence, private diaries that survived the periodic purges, and archaeological evidence from excavations of imperial estates. These materials paint a picture of systematic sexual exploitation that far exceeds even the most salacious rumors that circulated during Catherine's lifetime. The most disturbing discovery in recent years has been evidence that Catherine's system extended far beyond her personal relationships. Documents uncovered in provincial archives suggest that she established a network of sexual recruitment that reached into villages throughout the empire, with local officials instructed to identify attractive young people for potential imperial service. This system of sexual tribute helps explain how Catherine was able to maintain such a steady supply of lovers throughout her long reign. It wasn't simply a matter of court intrigue or personal magnetism. It was an institutionalized form of human trafficking that treated the sexual exploitation of young people as a routine administrative function. The psychological impact of this system on Russian society was profound and lasting. Families learned that their children's bodies were potentially valuable commodities in the imperial marketplace. Young people grew up understanding that their sexual availability might determine their entire family's economic prospects. The distinction between prostitution and political advancement became meaningless in a society where both were controlled by the same imperial apparatus. Catherine's legacy forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationship between personal morality and political effectiveness. Her sexual exploitation was undeniably horrific, but her achievements as a ruler were equally undeniable. She expanded Russian territory, reformed the legal system, promoted education and culture, and established Russia as a major European power. This paradox challenges simple moral judgments about historical figures. Catherine was simultaneously one of history's most effective rulers and one of its most systematic sexual predators. Understanding her reign requires acknowledging both aspects of her legacy rather than focusing exclusively on either her achievements or her crimes. The secrecy that still surrounds Catherine's private life suggests that powerful interests continue to benefit from hiding the full truth about her reign. The Russian government's refusal to declassify relevant archives may reflect concerns about how complete disclosure might affect contemporary political relationships or international diplomatic standing. But the most important lesson of Catherine's story may be how easily sexual exploitation can be disguised as political necessity or personal empowerment. The Empress's defenders have consistently argued that her numerous relationships represented female liberation rather than predatory behavior, that she was simply exercising the same sexual freedom that male rulers had always enjoyed. This interpretation ignores the systematic nature of Catherine's exploitation and the vast power imbalances that characterized all her relationships. There was nothing liberated or empowering about a system that treated young people's bodies as political currency, or that eliminated former lovers who might pose security threats. Catherine the Great's true legacy isn't the expansion of Russian territory or the promotion of Enlightenment values. It's the demonstration that sexual power and political authority can be combined into a system of control so effective that it continues to influence governance centuries after its creator's death. If this investigation into Catherine's hidden empire has made you question what other historical great rulers were really like behind closed doors, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the dark secrets of power. And let me know in the comments which other historical figures you think deserve this kind of scrutiny. Because the difference between official history and actual history